Has technology competition sharpened China-U.S. rivalry? What does that competition look like? And who's likely to win? For answers, join us at the CGTN webinar, Missions and Visions.
Has China-U.S. technology competition sharpened the rivalry between China and the United States? Hello and welcome to our special webinar, Missions and Visions, on the hot button topics about China and the world. The program is part of the CGTN's Global Arena series. I'm Tian Wei, host of World Insight with Tian Wei on CGTN. The scale and speed of China's technological advances in recent years have raised concerns in the West. It has now become one of the core issues in China-U.S. trade war, some say. But what does that competition look like, and who's likely to win? Or is it an issue of winning and losing? Today, we are going to discuss the tech rivalry between China and the U.S. And we have invited a strong panel of experts from both countries. Xue Lan, Dean of Schwarzman College with Tsinghua University. His research focuses on science and technology policies. Good to see you, Professor.
Good to see you.
Scott Kennedy, Senior Advisor at CSIS, a leading authority on Chinese economic policy and technology innovation. Scott, long time no see.
Great to see you, Tian Wei.
Good to see you. Christopher Thomas, non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings, who formerly led Intel's business in China and also McKinsey's Asia Semiconductor and High-Tech practice. Mr. Thomas, good to see you.
Good evening and good morning.
Hi. Last but not least, Andy Mok, senior research fellow at CCG, where he focuses on technology and its impact on great power relations. Andy, how are you?
I'm great.
Thank you so much for joining us, the four of you. And we are also joined by 30 participants from different parts of the world. They are coming from universities, research institutes, and tech companies. It's wonderful to see all of you. All of you watching our webinar, feel free to leave your comments, questions, or thoughts. Later, our panelists will have the time to take your questions. Now, let's have our panelists make their opening statement. So do you think China can surpass the U.S. in technology competition? Let me ask you one by one. 1 minute from every one of you. Christopher, you want to go first?
Well, that's a great honor to go first. The market share of Chinese semiconductor companies in the world has doubled in the last 5 years. There's a lot of progress. But there's a long way to go. If you take a look back over the last 20 years, if you look at the cumulative R&D in the entire technology industry by all companies, 6 out of every 10 R&D, 6 out of every $10 was from US companies. Less than 1 was from Chinese companies. The US companies have outspent Chinese companies by nearly 8-to-1 during the time period. There's a long way to go. Chinese companies face 4 challenges in becoming truly world-class. Moving from focus on business model innovation to true technology innovation. Not focusing on short-term money, but long-term money. Solving talent shortages, especially at the top end. R&D efficiency. And building a truly global outlook and leadership team. Those are the 4 big challenges Chinese companies must overcome.
Thank you, Christopher. You are suggesting there is interesting comparison between the two sides, and China still has some way to go. Thank you. Andy, you want to follow?
Yes.
Whether China can surpass the US in the so-called technology competition is a very important question. Despite seemingly formidable obstacles, especially in critical areas like semiconductors, we are seeing China overcome the hurdles being thrown up by the US because ultimately, technological advances depend really on only two things: money and brains. As China's economy continues to grow and is on track to surpass the US's, and China also continues to open up and attract global investment, the economic resources devoted to R&D will also surpass the US's. For example, Apple and Tesla are only two of the more high-profile examples of the commitment of global businesses to R&D in China. Similarly, China's scientific brainpower is not only homegrown, but increasingly foreign as well, as scientists around the world see more and more cutting-edge research opportunities in China and seek to work with a rapidly growing cohort of world-class Chinese colleagues. But the real advantage China has is its government. In the startup world, it's said that a mediocre product with excellent distribution will beat an excellent product with mediocre distribution every time. Because of China's unique system of governance, any given technology can be developed, piloted, commercialized, and disseminated much more effectively. 5G and electric vehicles are two well-known examples. But the next generation of the internet may be even more profound, as these new standards will drive development not only in China, but around the world. Given China's economic heft, growing pool of world-class scientific brainpower, and unique ability to develop, coordinate, and roll out new technologies from 5G to CBDCs, or central bank digital currencies, or the digital yuan, as it's sometimes called, means that it makes more sense to work with rather than try to oppose or hinder China's technological rise. Those seeking to pursue a separate path may end up isolated and left behind.
You're suggesting some specific areas China has been making tremendous progress, putting tremendous efforts into its development. Thank you so much. Let's go to Scott.
Certainly, China has made a lot of progress over the last 40 years in many different areas of technology, from AI to telecom to biopharma. And my interviews with Chinese companies and innovators are extremely impressive. Nevertheless, the U.S. is still running fast, and so are other countries in the West and around the world. And in many ways, there's also still a great deal of cooperation between China and the United States and others. In fact, between 2016 and last year, technology trade between the U.S. and China increased despite restrictions that have been imposed. So there is a significant amount of cooperation, and actually the U.S. has been seeking more cooperation and facing some difficulties from the Chinese side in making progress in some of those. I guess the final thing I would just say is that if there's going to be some type of technology decoupling between the U.S. and China, or China and the West more broadly, both the U.S. and China would lose, the world would lose, but the biggest loser would be China. Because it's still behind in some critical technologies that are important for its continued economic development. And China's been the biggest winner of globalization and global innovation ecosystems. So I really hope we can avoid technology decoupling because of the consequences it would have for everybody.
Thank you, Scott. I heard you. You are against the technology decoupling. However, you do believe if that happened, China might be the bigger loser. Professor Xue Lan in Beijing, would you agree?
I fully agree with the previous comments. I think we're in a global technologies ecosystem where I think, many companies and countries are interdependent. Tech world and decoupling hurts everybody. So I think that's something that nobody wants to see. But in the long run, tech development, takes time, takes investment, and takes also determination. I think in the long run, that could help China to resolve some of those challenges.
All right. It seems that Professor Xue also have very clear message against decoupling in technology and science research. However, China is determined to rely on itself and its cooperation with partners around the world, if possible. Thank you so much for all your providing the concise and precise statement about your thoughts. China has the advantage with unparalleled pool of talent, according to some. That is from universities that churn out more graduates than their American counterparts. Look at the chart. China is projected to have nearly twice as many STEM PhDs as the United States by 2025. By contrast, some say the number of domestic-born AI PhDs in the U.S. has not increased since 1990. Of course, those numbers are just a reference. But one thing I want to ask all of you is whether the Iron Curtain in science and technology is already a reality. Scott.
Certainly, the U.S. has imposed a variety of restrictions, placing about 600 Chinese companies on entity lists, and some other companies facing Treasury Department sanctions. All of these restrictions have nothing to do with trying to keep China down or impose restrictions and stop China from developing. They're really about national security and human rights issues. And there's still extensive technology cooperation between the two. And I know that the U.S. would like more if we can get cooperation from China on some key issues. So I think that the U.S. is not pursuing a strategy of decoupling. It's not pursuing a strategy of trying to keep China down. It's looking for a win-win partnership. And I think there are a variety of areas where the U.S. has been trying to achieve more partnership in areas of public health, like with vaccine development, and elsewhere on AI, where we've not received the type of cooperation from China that would allow us to do even more with each other.
Interesting. Is that Iron Curtain a reality or not? Do you think the U.S. is sincere in working with China? Andy, as Scott claimed.
Well, I think that the United States really feels deeply ambivalent about this technology Iron Curtain, in that on the one hand, businesses, academics, even some government officials in the United States see how vital China is, not only as a market, but as a partner, whether that's combating climate change, global health crises, and frankly, cutting-edge scientific R&D. Yet, there are many in the US as well that are afraid of China. So I think that there's a debate and an ambivalence in the US about this question. But again, as I said earlier, I think that to the degree that the US tries to impose a complete technological Iron Curtain, it's only going to hurt itself and be isolated and left behind.
Thank you, Andy. Christopher, what about your thoughts?
Well, I will paraphrase what a global technology executive told me about doing business in China. The politics have never been worse. Business has never been better.
Interesting.
So we have to look in the real numbers, as we said. There's so many projects, so many chips, so much collaboration, so much going on. The real life is business is very good on both sides. What is happening is around scientific collaboration, there are walls that are being thrown up around data sharing across borders that make it very difficult. For instance, the cybersecurity law in China defines national core data as data that cannot be transmitted outside the country. However, it doesn't define what national core data is. So many scientific collaborations, university to university, they are worried about breaking this law. So they say, no, let's stop the collaboration. It is not so much the high walls that are causing problems. It is the uncertainty. If the rules were clear, if the procedures were precise and agreed to by both sides, then collaboration would be much easier.
Thank you. Since you talk about those points, let me also share some with you, a reference on hand. Chinese companies forge ahead with building 5G equipment plans. Security concerns raised by the U.S. about Huawei, for example, and others are not necessarily shared by other countries. Since you talk about that point, according to a report by Harvard Kennedy School Belfer Center, developing countries appear reluctant to follow suit. And it is a survey being done at the end of 2021. Having said that, though, Professor Xue, let me go to you about that. There is a genuine concern about the world, whether it's going to be divided into two, namely by standards, by practices, by the way of systems being established. Are you worried? Will that be between China and the United States and countries behind China and the United States, two camps?
Technology is developing so fast and generating a lot of new concerns and new issues, such as the issue of security, personal privacy. So I think there's a lot of concern on those issues. Many countries have developed their own regulation. China's cyber law, and indeed, it's in response to those potential issues. So there's a lot of these needs to be further clarified. A lot of details yet to be, So hopefully, both Chinese firms and multinational companies can actually work out, how actually those laws will be implemented, but at the same time, can also allow the companies to collaborate.
Has technology competition sharpened China-U.S. rivalry? What does that competition look like? And who's likely to win? For answers, join us with Xue Lan, Dean of Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University, Scott Kennedy, Senior Advisor at CSIS, Christopher Thomas, Non-Resident Senior Fellow at Brookings Institute, and Andy Mok, Senior Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. Only on the CGTN webinar, Missions and Visions.
Those are all very important points raised by all of you. I'm sure our audience also have their question. We have got 30 of them attending this webinar, and they are coming from universities, research institutes, as well as from tech companies. Many of them are young voices, so let's hear their thoughts. Anyone, you can let me know if you want to ask a question. Xie Mingqi, I saw you over there.
Thank you, Ms. Tian, and thank you for all the panelists today. My name is Ming Qi, and I'm from the Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University. I'm the 6th cohort Schwarzman College, a scholar, and I'm from China. My question is closely related to the education internationally for tech-related talents. After the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen the trend that going abroad and coming to China has become an obstacle for a lot of people pursuing their education in tech and related policymaking field. And I would like to know what's your take on this. Will this be a very long-term and permanent change in the global education system, or it just a short-term change due to the pandemic? Thank you very much.
All right. What about scientific and also tech cooperation? Will boundaries, borders become a problem now for global education? Anyone? Scott?
I would say on the question of education, having been a professor for 15 years, I'm very impressed by students from China as well as Chinese universities. Myself, having studied in China a lot for many years as a student, I want that. I do think if we need to find a path away from China's current zero COVID policy, which will allow greater travel of Chinese to the United States, American to China, international travel, in a way that's safe.
Okay.
Not
Andy.
that's just, so let's see if we can find a pathway to safely open up borders.
Christopher?
So around education, I have a simple view. Chinese parents really, really care about the education of their children. If you take a look at the top PhD programs globally in sciences, only 4% of the top 100 programs are in China.
All right.
And 55% of the top 100 programs are in the United States. Tsinghua, where I teach, is improving very quickly, but education is a long-run industry, and American PhD programs will be at the top for a long time. Chinese parents will want to send their children to the very best education institutions globally. There will be a solution eventually.
Yes,
but I
at
am
the
very
end of the tunnel.
optimistic about the future of Chinese education. That's why I teach here.
All right, go back to the big screen. Anyone have a question? Charlotte Young, is that you? Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, it's me.
Please.
My question is regarding to the Metaverse, because Metaverse is currently a really hot topic across the world. I'm curious about like how can people like participate in the Metaverse in their day-to-day lives, and also like how China and the U.S. would act on this emerging topic. Thank you.
Nice angle. Metaverse, how U.S. and China likely to deal with that in terms of competition, cooperation, even rivalry?
On the Metaverse, I am worried about the Metaverse.
Very briefly, please.
In China. Because in the old days, China let chaos reign at the beginning of new technologies. And a lot of stuff was created. And then the regulators governed it and tamped it down and used it. Unfortunately, it feels like they're tamping it down before it even started, which is, I think, hindering innovation.
Okay.
So if you actually take a look at the collapse in the market value of Chinese tech companies, it has nothing to do with US export controls and everything to do with Chinese government regulation.
Very interesting, your thoughts. Of course, there are facts that might argue the other way around about the US government approach. But Andy, to you, Metaverse, you want to take that?
The Metaverse has gotten so much attention these days. And I think, frankly, it's a little bit overhyped on the one hand, because no one really knows what exactly is going to be involved. But this doesn't mean it won't be very important. I think of something that I believe Bill Gates said, that any important new technology is usually overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. So we look at the internet, that was similar too. There was an enormous boom and a bust, and many people became disillusioned. And yet we look today at how big an impact the internet, in particular the mobile internet, has had on people's lives all around the world. So I think the Metaverse is something similar, that what's important is to not get carried away in the short term by a lot of the excitement and the hype, especially from a financial or an investment perspective, but to be very clear-eyed and understand how this new technology can better serve fundamental human needs. And as long as one is clear about making that connection in a sensible business way, then I think the Metaverse can be very, very exciting. China and the US, of course, are taking two very different approaches to the Metaverse, as they are taking very different approaches to everything digital, the most important being thinking about the future of the internet. So I think, again, as long as both sides, or every side, of course, the world is more than just the US and China, can work together to smooth out and reconcile differences, rather than looking to block or stop the other side, the whole world will be better off.
All right. Anyone else? Let's have one more. Okay, we have Yang Zhiming. Please.
My question is, one of the interesting facts, and when I come to the United States, what I find out is that they actually, when we're talking about the U.S.-China relationship, and we're talking about how the technologies differences between the U.S. and China, and one thing that I realized very interesting is that there are actually diverse interests within the United States particularly between the business community and the political community and all the political establishment in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the Wall Street firms actually has a huge interest stakes in a lot of the Chinese technology firms, which means they actually hope they grow really well because they can get their profit maximization. So my question is whether there is actually a strong division on opinions between the business community, particularly the finance sector in the United States, than the political establishment in Washington, D.C. And if so, whose view is going to prevail in the United States? Thank you.
The division apparently going on in the United States toward China, and which voice is likely to be bigger, eventually deciding the future.
Who's on top and got influence in policy in Washington and the differences of various interest groups? Yes, I would say John is right that short-term capital, private equity firms, et cetera, are still focused on making money in China, investing there, and don't want any of these kinds of restrictions that are being proposed or being implemented. But the weight of opinion in Washington, D.C. in the policy community is coalescing around not creating an iron curtain, but a screen door, and a careful screen door to limiting certain kinds of investments where there are national security concerns. And I would say we're now really at a turning point in history because of Ukraine and the perception in the United States and other places that Beijing is vacillating on the issue of Ukraine. And that is leading to a further coalescing of more hawkish opinions in the U.S. government and amongst its allies, even in some developing countries like Kenya, which may end up leading to the outcome that none of us want, which are greater restrictions on technology cooperation.
All right. And we are wrapping up today's discussion. Thank you so much. It's a very concise and precise, I guess, the discussion. Xue Lan, Scott Kennedy, Christopher Thomas, Andy Mok. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. And also our audience members, great questions coming from you guys. I'd like to thank all our guests for such an insightful, engaging conversation. The race will still go on, some suggest, but we hope through more dialogues and there will be better understanding about each other so we can work toward a win-win competition in the new circumstances. I'm Tian Wei, and this is CGTN webinar, Missions and Visions. If you would like to find out more, you can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Stay tuned, and bye for now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.